With the latest on the corporate front, all the market trends, expert opinion, and sound business advice, it is your unique window into the business world, direct from the heart of China.
Hello and welcome to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Coming up, we will have half an hour of business news and analysis. On today's show, Chinese President Xi Jinping has outlined China's 8-point action plan for global development at the G20 Summit in Brazil. What is the key message? And this year's World Internet Conference Wuzhen Summit focuses on artificial intelligence and its social-economic impact. What is new in China's AI innovation? And now let's begin with our top story. The G20 Leaders Summit was held earlier this week in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Chinese President Xi Jinping said China's achievements in poverty alleviation have given other developing countries the confidence to strive for the same goal. He also outlined China's 8-point action plans for global development. Here is Gao Yiming with details.
President Xi said China will jointly promote a high-quality Belt and Road cooperation, implement the UN's Global Development Initiative, and make good use of the Global South Research Center. He announced support for the development of the African continent. Xi Jinping said China supports international cooperation for poverty reduction and food security. China has also announced its participation in the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. Xi said China, alongside Brazil, South Africa, and the African Union, is proposing an initiative on international cooperation in open science. The Chinese president also mentioned support for practical cooperation among G20 members to benefit the Global South. Xi Jinping said China is ready to implement the G20 Anti-Corruption Action Plan. He expressed willingness to expand unilateral opening up to the least developed countries. China has already announced zero tariff treatment for the least developed countries with which it has diplomatic ties.
And the Chinese president also called for joint efforts to build a fair and equitable global governance system. He warned against politicizing economic issues, fragmenting the global market, and taking protectionist moves in the name of green and low-carbon development. So for more on this, joined us on the line now are Professor Qu Qiang, Fellow of Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China, Dr. Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow at Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, and also Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. So, Yan, I will start with you. Share with us some of your observation of this year's G20 Summit, and what are the key messages in China's 8-point action plan for global development?
Right. So I think the major takeaways from the G20 is that despite geopolitical friction was looming large at the background of the summit, I think that countries will still be able to come up with some sort of consensus, and they did issue the leaders' declaration at the conclusion of the G20 summit. So I think this is actually quite encouraging. It really shows that these countries are determined, right, to uphold multilateralism and continue to use G20 as a platform to hold dialogues and to build consensus. And when it comes to this eight-item action plans, I think really it again drives home that China is really taking up a leadership role in really organizing these conversations and build the consensus. So I think my main takeaways from these 8 points are that, again, this is really China's way of not only talking the talks, but also walking the walks. So China has committed in real money terms, right, to replenish the Silk Road funds, to provide financing to support African countries. So all of these are really tangible, I think, steps towards the fighting hunger and fighting poverty and building connections around the world and really forge the kinds of multilateral cooperation. There are also very specific items like to promote the more open and the initiatives on international cooperation in open science, to continue to build this cooperation in scientific development, and also in terms of clean energy to sort of increase the investments in that area. So I think it really shows that China is determined to continue to uphold multilateral cooperation and also find ways to provide the financing, to provide the technological needs for this kinds of cooperation towards more development-oriented multilateral system.
So, Professor Qu Qiang, the Chinese president called for building an open world economy and more equal, inclusive, and constructive industrial and supply chain partnerships. So, what are some of the key challenges that need to be addressed in terms of achieving this goal?
I think if I take a look at the international multilateral platforms, on one hand is the G7, while the dominant power in the world economy, and on the other hand is the global south, symbolized with the BRICS platform and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And in between, we have the G20 and also the APEC. Protectionism, trade discriminations are becoming a more prevailing practice. And they're trying to use high tariff, like Trump's 10% of the tariff, regardless of who you are, on everybody, and then probably more of the tariff on the emerging market like China, like ASEAN nations and Latin America, etc. So this has been putting the emerging market, especially the global south country, into a very, very not so favorable position. And they're going to impede them from having a better life, higher living standard, and achieving the well-being of their people. And this can be a real problem, because this looks like politically correct for the G7 nations themselves, but actually they're hurting not only the world trade and world economy, but also themselves. They have to understand where the raw material come from, where the services come from, where the products come from, who made their toys, who made their car parts, who made their lithium batteries, who made the solar panels, and who sent them the oil and gas and iron ores and etc. So closing up their trade border, raising up the tariffs, isolate themselves from the world open systems can be a cancer of the world economy right now, and hurting everybody is the only consequences. So this is a problem we're having right now for all the human being, for the human being community with a shared fate. So that's the reason why I think President Xi Jinping has proposed that we really need to rebuild, reconstruction, and optimize this trade system, this economic system global-wise. We need to have a opener, more transparent, non-discriminatory trading system, the economic systems.
So Dr. Zhou Mi, so building an open world economy and more equal, inclusive, and constructive industrial and supply chain partnerships, what need to be done?
Yeah, if we are going to achieve that goal, I think that we probably need to address different demands of the different stakeholders. Like for some of the developing countries, they are really want not only to export their resources, but also trying to improve their abilities on digital technology, or have better transformation to new energy. I think that is definitely what they really want, because they not only want to provide enough income, but also to improve the living status or conditions of the people. So we may have to address the challenges, and if we are able to provide a better support for those countries, we may have to consider that as a whole. We have to connect between us and trying to provide a better products and services and strengthen the supply chains and improve the industrial chains. So we need very firm, actions towards same directions, and we keep on moving towards that goal.
So President Xi Jinping also stressed the need to improve global digital governance, especially on artificial intelligence, to make sure that AI is for good and for all. So what needs to be done to achieve this goal?
So I think to achieve that, we need at least two important multilateral sort of cooperation. One is in terms of regulation. I think regulation is very important because we know that even though AI is full of potential to improve productivity, but it also comes with many different risks. And therefore, I think it's important that we're going to have the international coordination in terms of the regulatory framework, for example, on data privacy and also in the legitimate uses of AI. For example, can we use AI in certain military applications? And I think that is very important for the world to come to terms with these kinds of regulations. So then companies or other entities are not going to take advantage of the regulatory loopholes to benefit themselves at the expense of the rest of the world. And the second, I think, important aspect is to bridge the digital divide. We need a lot of investments. We need to invest in infrastructure so then developing countries have the hard infrastructure, right, the internet access to be able to utilize AI. But we also need investments in human talent. So then, developing countries, the people would be able to get the training that it's sufficient for them not only to apply AI, but also to create AI. So I think those are really important, and they need to be done at the multilateral level because, again, developing countries don't necessarily have the resources to be able to reduce the gap from the developed countries. So I think regulations on the one hand, and also the more inclusive and equal access to AI are the two really important aspects to work on in order to bridge the digital divide and the AI divide, and to really achieve that people-centered AI development.
So, there are a number of global challenges that the G20 members are facing. So give us a sense of what's the importance is it, especially at this moment of forming global economic governance structures?
Right. So I think, when it comes to the poly crises, there are definitely so many of them. And what I think the G20 can really work on are more on the economic and climate aspects, right? So I think what would be more fruitful and productive is to G20 countries to really think about, for example, climate change actions. And so how to provide sufficient financing, especially for developing countries, which seem to be always insufficient, right? With all this COP29 discussions, developing countries are still not getting sufficient of climate financing. So I think, at G20, with, China's leadership and others, I think there might be a more fruitful way to come up with the financing. And second, of course, is that this year's one of the main goal is to fight global hunger and poverty. And again, I think, with these very rich countries and also with that are big agricultural producers, I think there are maybe better discussions at the G20 to form the consensus to, for example, establish certain buffer stock to stabilize grain prices, and also to provide more technological know-how and capacity building for developing countries to ensure their food sovereignty. I think those are really important policies and economic programs that could be forming some sort of improvements at the G20's discussion. So I think, again, the economic issues may be having more potential, right, to work on at this kinds of forum.
So Professor Qu Qiang, tell us more details of China's achievements in poverty alleviation, and what should the global efforts be at reducing the poverty around the world?
Well, China's poverty alleviation is probably one of the most important miracles achieved after the year of 2000, especially when United Nations announced that the MDG, the Millennium Development Goal, and China is the only nation, especially among the emerging markets, achieved that goal to reduce the extreme poverty, which is $2 of the living standards per day. I think China right now has already eradicated the extreme poverty for sure. Absolute poverty is a bygone, a long gone issue in China. So even for a huge economy like China with 1.4 billion of population, and this has been a great absolute achievement among all the nations, developed nations included, because China has done this only within 20 years rather than 200 years, or even for some other big nations with a similar size of the population, they still have a lot of people in hunger and dying of that. But I don't think China is satisfied with the achievement with itself alone, because China is always trying to be a responsible player globally. It wants to make sure that every developing nation, especially the least developed nations, will enjoy the same opportunity provided by the global supply chain, by the globalization and the world trade. And I think that's a reason why China has made a lot of announcements. For example, during these G20 conferences, and China speak for the emerging market, developing nations, China announced that we're going to have unilateral tariff-free treatment for the least developed nations, which means you don't need to pay any kind of the tariff. And also, we're going to write off lots of the supportive loans towards the least developed nations to help them to develop and help them to increase more of the infrastructures. And also, as Professor Yan Liang had just mentioned, we have lots of technology supportive policy towards the developing nations because we understand technology is uttermost important the driving force of economic development, and also the only force can help the emerging market to catch up with the latest trend, to catch up with the developed nations. And more than that, we have the training programs happening. For example, right now, I have more than 20 students from emerging market applying for my postgraduate students. They want me, they want me to be their supervisors because Chinese government has provided lots of the training program, scholarship for the students. And we also have on-ground or inside training programs in their nation. For example, personally, I've been participating in Chinese international poverty reduction programs myself. We have programs in Indonesia, in Myanmar, in Africa, Ethiopia for sure, and in Kenya, some in Latin America, try to show local people how to use technology, how to grow crops with modern technology, and how to use better seeds to increase their food yieldings, something like that, etc. So I think China is honoring its commitment to the emerging market, especially least developed nations, and more of the practice will be seen and more of the achievement will be made.
And Dr. Zhou Mi, so if you look at the topics and the joint statement, actually reduction, poverty, and problem of hunger, climate finance, and global institutions reforms like IMF and World Bank, those topics themselves represents the justice and equality in a sense between the developing country and the developed world, right?
Yeah, it is true that when we're talking about these topics, especially for the G20 this year, we can find that us are talking about how can we make it more fair to represent what is happening nowadays compared with half a century ago after the World War II. So the world has changed, and developing economies are really taking very important part in the global governance. So we need to have a better mechanism to regulate all this kind of cooperation and provide a better and more facilitate cooperation. I think that in this regard, we are in this G20 platform, and G20 is also a very important platform for the different economies to express their opinions about what is a fair mechanism and what can we do to improve that. The topic this year, we can find that in the continuously several years after Indonesia and Brazil, so we are having more discussions. I mean, the heart of this G20 summit is from the developing economies, the global south. So they may have more focus on what we can do to try to improve governance issues and trying to provide a better access, the points for a lot of very poor countries and a lot of countries with a lot of good promises in the future.
Well, we're speaking with Dr. Zhou Mi, Senior Research Fellow with Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, Professor Qu Qiang, Fellow of Belt and Road Research Center at Minzu University of China, and also Yan Liang, Professor of Economics, Willamette University. And after a short break, we'll take a look at the development of the artificial intelligence. Stay with us. You're listening to Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. This year's World Internet Conference Wuzhen Summit was in eastern China. The event in Zhejiang province focuses on artificial intelligence technology, industrial development, and its impact on society and the economy. China is leading the way in AI innovation, especially in generative AI. According to the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, the country has over 4,500 AI companies. So first of all, the Wuzhen Summit has emphasized the innovation and application of AI technology. So Dr. Zhou Mi, what's a new thing in it, and what do all the new leaps in AI mean for different industries?
Yeah, we know that AI is a very new technology. I mean, it's not that new, but it's coming to become more useful like this year. So we can see that a lot of technology emerging, and they are really helpful for dealing with some of the problems and improve the efficiency. But how can we make it sustainable is a real important question, because from investors' view, they want to find the market. So I think that here is not only create and some technology, but trying to use them as a market. As we may find that in China, there is a very huge market for improvement efficiency by applying the artificial intelligence in the manufacturing and also services. So it's not only about the structure or technological aspect of improving the efficiency. And a very important issue we need to address is about the fairness of the society. How can we guarantee that the people have enough preparation for the change of the technology and their abilities? How can we improve them? So I think that is a very important topic this year. We need to address the usage of this artificial intelligence technology, but at the same time to improve adaptation abilities of the society to better use this technology efficiency.
So what do you find is new things, and what do all this, new leaps in AI mean for different industries?
Right. So I think this summit, right, has really showcased many different types of technologies and their wide applications. So basically, as long as the industries have any potential for automation, I think AI could have the potential to be applied. So I think again, we looked at the different sort of applications. It could be used in industrial production. It could be used in different services sector. That would allow for example, healthcare to be done better, and also education. There's also many other financial services, logistics, transportation, all these different industries can really utilize AI better and to improve the productivity. But I think overall, the sense is that, we wanted to use the AI not only just to provide, better economic outcomes, but they're also to balance other interests like security, like data privacy, and so on and so forth, and also equity, of course. So I think, this is just to show that it's on the one hand that we wanted to advance more AI technologies, innovations, applications, and also, build that resources, right, energy especially, to support the kinds of ecosystem. But on the other hand, I think we need to upgrade our approach to AI, improve the regulations, the guidance, and really the governance of AI, so that we can really make AI work for humans, as opposed to the other way around, to only serve certain special small groups of interests.
So Professor Qu Qiang, so China is leading the way in AI innovation, especially the generative AI. So what do you think are the main driving factors behind this success?
Well, I think there are several reasons after this trend. I think number one is the investment. China has actually, invested a lot on the AI because we fully understand AI represents the future of technology trend, and also this is very important for us to have another round of industrial revolution, like what we have seen about the mobile internet back in 2008 and 2010, which enabled China to become one of the most important digitalization economy in the whole world. I think secondly is we prepared a very well-educated fleet of the engineers and research talents in this area. China probably is the country with the most of the digital and computer science, researchers and also talents in the whole world. We have a very, very large reserve of the human resources and the brain power in this area. And we have many of the universities focusing on this area for sure. And also China probably is the largest nation having one of the most important largest number of the IP as well as the copyright in the computer science, especially the AI. If you take a look at the paper publishing numbers in the whole world in the past 5 years, you'll find that China is the number one country with the most of the papers published in the AI and related computer science. And certainly, I think we have a very good cooperation between the public sectors and the private sector. In China, we have the leading force and funding from the government for sure. Government from the central government to the local government, we all pay attention to this area, especially the government leading the fund we call the mother fund. And also we have many of the state-owned enterprises are doing so. But meanwhile, we have a very large ecology of the private funding, for example, private equity, VC, and angels. They're doing a lot of things. So we've been seeing major Chinese GPU companies, AI companies are getting listed recently with the help of a government, for example, like the Little Giant program, and also the technology subsidy program for the SME, tech-savvy SMEs. So these are helping the trend happening onto China, but also not only to China. China does not only want to preserve this, advantage itself, and also he wants to, spill over the advantage to all the emerging markets. I think that's a reason why President Xi Jinping mentioned in G20 about technologically empower the emerging market, especially the least developed nations, to help them cross the digital divide. And that's what China is going to do in the next 5 or 10 years.
And in your view, what role can international cooperation play in promoting the development of AI?
Well, we strongly believe international research network can help China to develop AI. For example, like just say large language model. You don't want your large language model just to use in Chinese context. For example, you want to be used with Arabic. You want to be used in the language of Thai, language of Japanese, language of the Amharic, the African languages, or some other languages. So you need a lot to get access to lots of the transcript. This can only be done with international cooperation. And we do understand the network of talents. The brain power is very important. And also about the user scenarios is also very important. You don't just want to use theoretical tools, but you want AI can be actually implemented, can be down to the earth, can be used for the daily life scenario. And that requires you to use your AI tool in many kinds of scenarios: a nursing home, restaurant, education in the class, and also to be used with auto design, something like that in the car industry. They require international cooperation so you can test your AI, improve your AI, and make them evolve faster and faster until you get a very practical version, can be the real productivity in the industry. So that's the meaning of internationalization and cooperation of it.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Qu Qiang from Minzu University of China, Dr. Zhou Mi from Chinese Academy of International Trade and Economic Cooperation, and also Professor Yan Liang from Willamette University. And that's all the time we have for this edition of Biz Today. I'm Zhao Yang in Beijing. Thank you so much for listening.